fellow bookworms, September is dead. My name is Whitney, and we just finished reading The Immortal Nicholas by Glenn Beck. Really excited to talk about this one. Before I do, though, just a reminder, today we are going to be starting the book My Sergei by Katerina Gordieva. I did mispronounce her name last week, so I apologize for that. But really excited to reread this one. I did read it as a teenager, and I just remember bawling my eyes out. So if you're reading along with me, make sure you do have the tissues, and you can find my thoughts on this one, of course, next Wednesday. And then next Wednesday, we are going to be reading Freedom's Challenge by Anne McCaffrey. We, of course, have already read Freedom's Ransom, which this is the fourth book in the quartet, and this one is actually the third book. So I am reading them backwards, not planned. My husband had Freedom's Ransom on his shelf, and I picked it up and actually really enjoyed it, which surprised me because I'm not a big sci-fi fan. And then this one I found while I was doing a haul for my ABC Author Challenge and picked it up. I didn't know it was the third book, but honestly, since I've already read the fourth book and I kind of have an idea of the backstory, it really doesn't bother me that much. But I'll go ahead and read the synopsis for you guys in case you are interested in trying any of these books out. But it says, no longer slaves, the intrepid colonists introduced in Freedom's Landing have built a brave new world on the planet they call Botany. Chris Borgensen has come a long way since the day alien spaceships scooped her up in a slave raid. She has fallen in love with the gentle Zanal, despite his being of the same race as the contending slavers, and has worked by his side to turn the uninhabited world where they were dumped into a home. The thousands of abandoned slaves have succeeded. They have done far more than just survive. Now Chris has a house of sorts, a child she adores, and a respected place in the community. But she still feels a soldier's duty to escape and rejoin the struggle. As the colonists gain strength, their plans can be more ambitious. A cleverly faked shipwreck gives them an opportunity to steal a spacecraft, and they know they can do it again. They have heard reports of freedom fighters on all the worlds enslaved by the powerful, mysterious EOC. Even among the Kateni, chosen by the EOC as a privileged servants, a rebel underground exists. Earth, of course, is full of pockets of resistance. Brief practice missions to Ketan have taught the colonists that humans can be disguised as Kateni and that some of them can speak the language well enough to pass. They are ready for a daring attempt. If human colonists can join forces with Kateni rebels, they might be able to strike a real blow at the EOC who control them all. But the dangers of a raid on Catan are tremendous, especially for Zanal, the only Kateni among them, who must lead the attack on his own planet. His love for Chris and their child, and for the freedom he has tasted on Botany, make clear to him what he must do, but the fate of his homeworld can only break his heart. So, really excited to revisit some of these characters and kind of get more into what happened previously. But yeah, that's what we are going to start reading next Wednesday. And then, of course, before we get into the Immortal Nicholas, just a reminder, even though it's almost over, we are doing 25 days of Bookmas over on TikTok and Instagram. There will be a compilation video here on YouTube, but if you're interested in seeing what I've been getting before that video comes out, definitely check out those platforms. And then I'll also be doing another video where I talk more in depth about which books I'm most excited for and all that good stuff. Of course, the ABC challenge is still ongoing. I am on my F author, which is Thomas Flanagan. That is a thick book, but updates will come out here and there for that challenge. And then we are going to be resuming our book of the month and our series Saturday. So, book of the month, we break down a book by chapter sets and do a discussion. Every Monday, I do different discussion questions, and then at the end of the month, after we finish the book, I do discussion questions based on the whole book over on my website. And then series Saturday, we are still working our way through the Dresden Files series, which there's so many of those. We're only a quarter of the way through, so we're going to be resuming that. I'm not going to do a video every Saturday, but I will do update videos as I continue to work through that series. And then, of course, we still have our Throwback Thursdays. So if you're not already, please do subscribe, hit the bell notification so you don't miss out on any of the videos that come out. And then give this video a like while you're at it. It really does help the channel. So With that being said, let's go ahead and jump into the Immortal Nicholas. Now, I will say, if you don't celebrate Christmas or you don't celebrate Christmas um, with Christ in mind, this might not be a book for you. But at the same time, it is so beautifully written, especially the first portion. The first portion, so it's in two parts, and the first part is the bulk of the book, like probably three quarters of the book, and it really isn't all that in your face. The main character actually doesn't even believe. He doesn't believe in any sort of God at all, let alone, this baby or anything like that. So, um, I think even if you're not very religious or not much of a believer, you might really still enjoy the first part of this book, especially if you do celebrate Christmas. So I would encourage you to pick that up and then maybe just take the second portion of the book, which is, like I said, just a small portion, like maybe a quarter of it. Take that one with a grain of salt because it does come a little bit more heavily religious and such, but it's still very beautiful even with that aspect in there. But basically, Glenn Beck wrote this book because he does believe in Christ and that's why he celebrates Christmas. And he was getting frustrated because his children were more focused on Santa and the presents than on Christ himself. So he wanted to kind of combine the two, and that's how he came up with this story. And absolutely beautiful, very heartbreaking actually. The main character, whose name is Agios, I mean, that poor man, he sees a lot in his lifetime, and then of course beyond. But very heartbreaking. Made me cry in the beginning. Made me cry at the end of part one, and cried a little bit at the end of part two too. But I mean, just such a beautiful story. So basically, it's following Agios. Like he's the main character, and he's kind of on the outskirts. He's living during the time that Christ is born, and then he goes through to Christ's crucifixion. But that's not the main point of the story. Um, so it's following Agios, and he collects frankincense, which leads him to one of the wise men, which in turn leads him to accompany them as they go to find this baby that was born. But the whole time, he doesn't believe. Like doesn't believe in any religion. He doesn't believe in any gods. And then let alone that this baby is, some awesome thing to behold. And so he accompanies the wise men as kind of like a guard because they don't want to draw a bunch of attention to themselves, but they obviously need some sort of protection. So he comes with them along with a slave who he managed to buy essentially, whose name is Krampus. And I love that touch because Krampus is disfigured and he's larger than most men, and so he gets abused like grievously. Like, I mean, so cruel. People are just cruel to him and they're scared of him because he is disfigured and he's extra large compared to other men. Um, and so he actually ends up, one of the wise men, he convinced them to buy him, and then he convinced them to sell him to him without like actually having to pay for him, because they ended up initially stealing the frankincense from him. So it's kind of like look, you stole this from me, and now you're having me, collect more frankincense for you, and now you want me to do this, like give him to me, so that way I can free him. And so he ends up having Krampus come along with him, and they just protect the three wise men. They go and they see this baby, and it pulls in the shepherd, so it pulls in key points of the story that we all know, especially if if you do celebrate because of Christ, like these stories, and you even know them like from some of the songs, like the little shepherd boy. It reminded me of the song "Do You Hear What I Hear?" Or and I mean, yeah, it's just absolutely beautiful. But the whole time he doesn't really believe. So even once he sees the baby, like he feels, this little tug, but he still doesn't fully believe it. Um, And then the three wise men are like, obviously the baby needs to get out because Herod's trying to kill him. And so they're like, "Can you go and protect them? Like, don't interact with them. Like, we want them to appear as just a normal family, but follow along, and that way you can protect them if something happens." And so he ends up going and following, along with the family, why they're kind of outcast. And then once they're able to return home, he decides, you know what, I'm going to follow them along home. He actually gets a letter from one of the wise men, like, I'm gonna let them know they can come home if you'll accompany them. But again, just stay back. Don't let anybody on know that you're accompanying them and protecting them. Just kind of hang back and follow them. And then he ends up, kind of settling down where around where the family is. And so originally it's in Egypt, and then they go back to Nazareth, and he kind of settles on the outskirts with Krampus, and they have sheep, and at one point they have goats and such. And so it just follows along with his life. And then if later on, you know, Jesus is now a man, and it leads up to his crucifixion. And at the time of Jesus' crucifixion, something else happens, and it breaks Agios. And I mean, it just, I don't know, that part really got to me. And he still doesn't, this whole time he doesn't believe. Like, he does not believe. But he's kind of has this hope that maybe it's true and maybe he can heal Krampus. Because Krampus is not only physically disformed on the outside, he has a weak heart. And he's also getting older now, and his joints are hurting because obviously they're deformed. And so, that takes its toll a lot quicker. So it kind of has this hope that, well, maybe it is true and maybe he can heal Krampus. Like, he still doesn't want anything for himself. He just wants Krampus to be healed. And there's another moment, like earlier on before that, where he kind of sort of believes for just a moment, but he doesn't hold on to that belief at all. And so then that's kind of the end of part one, and jumps forward like 300 years, and he's been living as a hermit this whole time. So as far as he knows, Jesus is just dead. Like, he doesn't know anything of the events that took place after or anything like that, because he's just been living as a hermit. Like, he has not been part of the world. And this is where we learn he finds out he's immortal, after the events that took place. He ends up learning that he's immortal and he cannot die. And so it's like been 300 years, and there's this little shepherd boy named Nicholas, and comes and kind of befriends him. So this is his first interaction with anybody, for 300 years. And Nicholas is going to be a priest. His uncle, also named Nicholas, is a priest, and so he's training. So every, he comes and trains with his uncle, and then he goes back to his parents. And then it kind of follows along, several years throughout Nicholas's life. And that's when Agios learns that Jesus rose again. And so that's where it starts becoming more heavily religious and very like preachy and church based and such, is as Agios is starting to believe, and he's trying to learn. He's reading basically the Bible. There's scrolls, but basically it's the Bible. And he's reading them and learning all he can about what happened after he saw Jesus crucified. Um, and then he's the toys come into play, because obviously the whole time you're like, well, how does it combine with Saint Nicholas? Like, how does this all combine? Because like from the beginning it's supposed to be Agios, who's obviously Santa, and he has always made little toys out of wood, and he'll leave them, like, as he was part of like the caravan and then the wise men and such. He would leave toys for children. He would just leave them where children could find them. And then, he doesn't whittle or make toys for a long time until Nicholas comes into his life. And then he starts that over again. And then as Nicholas becomes an adult and an old man, he starts leaving money behind. And they do this in secret. So they kind of get together and they leave toys and money. And then the stockings over the fireplace, like, they meet up. and they're kind of joking with each other. And well, I heard, that you're leaving toys, and well, I heard that you threw money through a window and it landed in stockings over the fireplace. And so they kind of just joke, and it brings in like little, traditions and lore and legend and such into it. And then of course nobody knows, like who's doing this because they do it in secret. And Nicholas, when he was a boy, had given Agios um, a jacket made of wool that is red with white trim. And so yeah, it just kind of they start to become this legend, and they think Agios is Nicholas's uncle, Saint Nicholas. And so well, they start calling him Saint because of all the presents and such, but they think he's Nicholas's uncle, so they think it's Saint Nicholas, and that's how it all comes and ties in. But absolutely beautiful story, absolutely heartbreaking. And like I said, even if you don't celebrate Christmas because of Christ, I think the beginning of the story is so beautifully written. I don't think you necessarily need to be a believer to enjoy that portion of the story. And then, like I said, if you're not a believer and you read like the second part of the story, just take it with a little bit with a grain of salt. But if you do believe in Christ and that's why you celebrate Christmas, 100% this book is for you. Definitely pick it up. I think it's one to be read every Christmas. I'm definitely going to be doing so. And I did mark one page. I mean, there were so many moments it was just like pulled at my heart. But this one, I just really, really enjoyed this line. Um, and so Adios, of course, this whole time doesn't really believe, and this is when he's first starting to kind of come around to the idea. And it says, it was so unexpected, so difficult to fathom, to grasp and believe that Agios couldn't quite get his heart all the way around it. But everything Jesus was saying was true, and his soul knew it long before his mind could accept it. And I don't know, I really like that line because I think in many aspects in life, that kind of happens. Like, in your heart that something is, but your mind just kind of talks you out of it or plays tricks on you. And so it's hard to wrap your mind around certain things that you know in your heart. And so I really, really like that line. But I mean, absolutely stunning book. I strongly encourage you to pick this up, and give it a try if you do celebrate Christmas. If you don't, obviously, this is not going to be a book for you. And like I said, I think it's worth it even if you aren't very religious and don't really believe in Christ or anything like that. I think the story itself is still a beautiful one. So I think I've been kind of rambling on enough, so I'm going to go ahead and leave you guys here. Again, don't forget to check back next week for my thoughts on my Sergei. So excited to revisit this one. And yeah, happy reading, everyone. Bye.